Alright, well, you're looking at the motherboard inside the chassis of an Epiphone Valve Junior head, and just want to make a little video to talk about a few mods that I've seen on the internet. I got this thing and thought it was really cool, but I figured out right away that it was pretty muddy and I wasn't really into especially the clean sound so much. I mean, you hook up a distortion pedal to this thing and crank it up a bit and it sounds great, but yeah, on the clean end it was just kind of muddy, and really with just the distortion you get from the tubes, it was a little kind of farty, I guess is what most people said. So I wanted to try my hand at doing a few mods, and I found that there's plenty of information out there, but nothing that really clarifies what it does, and nothing that's super helpful to a beginner. Which I am. I've soldered things before, so I'm a little comfortable with that, which helps, but yeah, really a lot of this stuff is pretty easy, and the chances of doing any serious damage to your amp is pretty low. I mean, you can look at this thing and see there's really not much to it. I mean, this right here is your 12AX7 preamp tube. These resistors and a couple of capacitors are pretty much everything that shapes the sound before it goes into your EL84 power amp tube. And there's a couple associated with that, but generally this is everything that has to do with the sound. The other end of the board is all power to the tubes, basically. So I don't really want to mess with that, and I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner, that's for sure. So the first thing I want to talk about is the jumpy mod. I read about it. It's called the free mod. It's supposed to open this thing up a little bit, and that's pretty simple. There's another video on YouTube that lays it out pretty clear, although it doesn't really go into what it does. So the jumpy mod is this jumper right here, JP1. See, there's a white line right there, indicates that there used to be a jumper there. So obviously I already removed mine. Looks just like that jumper there, just a little chunk of wire goes across, and the jumpy mod is simply snipping that wire. And now what that does, I'll try to explain it pretty clear, is this is a signal path out of your preamp tube. Comes through here, goes through this end basically of these. So that signal just goes right past here. This jumper goes across to this capacitor, then back to ground. All this does is scrapes a little bit of signal off. Pulls, as far as I can tell, it's intended to pull off the kind of upper end harmonic distortion from the preamp tube, and it seems to do that pretty effectively. So cutting this eliminates that, and it just lets that signal keep going. And it makes it brighter for sure, but it also alone seems to increase the distortion coming out of the tube a bit. Makes it a little bit harder to get a clean sound down below, but it helps a lot with a little less, farty, muddy distortion sound. Now, you can see here that I didn't just cut my wire. I actually soldered. I took it completely out and soldered 2 leads into it, and I've run those to a switch. Now, I only did that because I was soldering some other stuff and the board had to come out anyway. Now, I figure what you could do is just as easily cut this in half, bend these up, and wire these leads directly to the 2 ends of the jumper. You want to make sure they're not touching anything, and definitely not touching each other. I would recommend this mod. It's definitely cheap. It's easy. You can get a little switch at Radio Shack, which is the other part I would definitely recommend. I mean, if you do this and you don't like it, well, then you gotta take the amp back apart just to kind of repair a pretty simple thing, and it's kind of nice. There's good flexibility with this switch because it definitely drastically changes the sound of the amp. And yeah, it's got a little single pole, single terminal switch, $3 at Radio Shack. You got on and you got off. Now, I will say that you'll want to put it in upside down. I don't know if you can read it on there. It says on and off, because turning this switch off will turn on your bright. So it makes more sense to have it upside down. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And if you don't like it, you can flip it over. If you just want to change your sound a little bit, it's a really cheap, pretty easy mod that I mean, yeah, I'd recommend it to just about anybody. I mean, you probably wouldn't even have to solder these wires onto the cut jumper leads. If you could figure out another good way to secure them on there, then yeah, wire up the switch. You have to drill a hole in the chassis here. I drilled mine right through the front. Not a big deal. And yeah, it actually does quite a bit. And you're not going to hurt anything. I mean, that was kind of what I was worried about. What are you doing? You know, what's going on? Are you going to hurt anything? You're not going to hurt anything by eliminating this altogether.